right, so good afternoon, and we should probably just take a second to introduce ourselves, although we're probably known to many of you here in the room. My name is Chris Capozzola. I'm a professor of history and the Senior Associate Dean for Open Learning here at MIT, and I have the pleasure this afternoon of a conversation that begins with Marta Belcher, who I'll ask to introduce yourself now.
Oh, sure. I'm Marta Belcher. I am the president of FileCoin Foundation and also FileCoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web. I'm also general counsel of Protocol Labs, special counsel at EFF, among other things.
Great. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask you a few questions and kick off a kind of concluding conversation here this afternoon. We've had some amazing presentations all morning and through lunchtime, some amazing conversations, some nerd sniping was the term that was introduced this morning, and I think many of us have been fully sniped by this point in the afternoon, but let's continue that conversation. And then I hope we'll have a few minutes at the end maybe to open things up for beyond. So I wanted to just start by getting to know you a little bit better. And I want to get a sense, if you could tell us about your background and how you got started in this space. And from the beginning, I presume you didn't, as a kid, want to, or know of, that this is a job you could even do. So what's your journey?
So I am a lawyer, and I care a great deal about civil liberties. So I knew that I was going to do technology law actually from middle school on, and I knew I wanted to do something involving technology in the law. And I really got involved in law school with the Electronic Frontier Foundation and similar organizations, and was really drawn right after law school to the cryptocurrency space, because even in those early days, it was really apparent to me that these technologies could really take a lot of the civil liberties protections of cash and import those civil liberties protections into the online world. So things like censorship resistance from surveillance. So these were things that I thought were really important for preserving civil liberties as technology progressed. And that's how I got involved in cryptocurrency initially as a lawyer, and then got deeply involved with the FileCoin project.
That's great. That's great. And we'll come back to all of those themes as we go along. But the other thing I think people would like to sort of hear your vision and articulation of is just at the beginning, right? Just the mission of the FileCoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web. Not only in its words but also in its spirit. Like, what are you trying to do, and where is it taking you?
Yeah, so there are two organizations, and when we were founding FileCoin Foundation, we really wanted to also found FileCoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web, because we recognized that there are all of these important decentralized web technologies, and we wanted to not just support FileCoin, but also support the broader decentralized web ecosystem. And so our formal mission is to preserve humanity's most important information. But we do that through things like education about the decentralized web, projects, research and development, and really trying to build a whole community that's much bigger than just FileCoin, that's really about building the next generation of the web, protecting user privacy, security, and civil liberties.
Okay. And did the two foundations start at the same time? Are they designed to work together? How did they work?
Yeah, so these are brother-sister organizations. So at the same time as we founded FileCoin Foundation, we also founded FFDW, FileCoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web. And the idea being that FileCoin Foundation really specifically serves as the governance body for the FileCoin network, whereas FFDW is a US 501c3 charity that is really doing charitable work that is about this broader decentralized web and the future of the internet.
Okay. And so I want to go back to the mission, which is to preserve all of humanity's, say it again.
It's preserve humanity's most important information.
Preserve humanity's most important information. Okay, that's a tall order, right? And so I'm going to ask you a question off the cuff. Do you see that as a technological challenge, a social challenge, both? How do you see that challenge?
Yeah, so I think it's all of the above. I think a couple of important things about that mission. The first important thing about that mission is we really need decentralized technologies in order to truly preserve information. And the reason for that is right now we really live our lives through just a handful of corporations, through Microsoft and Google and Amazon. And anything on the web or anything really digitally that's preserved is most likely stored on the servers of one of those three companies, right? Which means also that you have these single points of failure. And that becomes really apparent when you have things like an AWS outage and these massive swaths of the web go down for hours. Like you see the problem with single points of failure. But things can also go down because one of the companies decides to take it down or for some other reason, right? And so having these single points of failure is really a problem in terms of the ability to actually preserve things into the future in a way that is it actually lasts, that is reliable. And so for us, we really think that there is this technological problem, if you want to preserve humanity's most important information, where you need to create a better version of the web. You need to create a version of the web where you have many, many copies that you can store all over the world. There's no single points of failure. And where users are really in control of their own data, right? And you're not sort of just hoping that your data doesn't go down with whatever AWS decides to do. And so that is, I think, the technological challenge, and why, for us, preserving humanity's most important information is a really critical piece of building the decentralized web.
I think, well, like I said, it's a tall order. It's an amazing task, and in any point in history, that would be a big challenge, right? But in our current moment, right, in the 2020s, there are special challenges. Those are technical, they are economic, they are political, and so I think what is it about this moment right now that is the biggest challenge for preserving humanity's information, and how are you meting that?
Yeah, so I think one important thing is just straight up capacity is a problem, right? We are creating so much data, right? There's so much data that's being created. And in terms of capacity, I remember before we launched the FileCoin network, there was this sort of question of like, gosh, I wonder if we'll ever reach 1 exabyte of storage capacity. Like that would be so amazing. And the whole reason that we actually created this sort of incentive layer built on top of IPFS is because you really need that incentive in order to create the capacity to store humanity's most important information, right? And it was really sort of shocking. Within a very short time from launch, we actually hit an exabyte of storage capacity. And we're now at over 10 exabytes of storage capacity, which is enough to store all of humanity's written works more than 10 times over from the beginning of recorded history to today. So we do have a huge amount of capacity. And one of the things that was critical to creating that capacity was having this incentive layer built on top of IPFS. And that's sort of why FileCoin is important for addressing that particular problem.
Okay. Yes. So that we're going to run out of prefixes at some point, right? Petabytes and exo and everything else. So keep going, please. That's some of the technical and capacity challenges. What about some of the political and social contexts that you see this work contributing to at this time?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of really interesting challenges that come from decentralized storage, right? So one of the questions that is always one of the first that you get asked is things like content moderation and how do you do that? And so one of the things that we really early on were excited about was a project building on top of the FileCoin network and building on top of IPFS called Murmuration Labs that is building software to do content moderation at scale in a decentralized way, where basically each gateway operator can actually choose what they are blocking, but also subscribe to lists of other gateway operators and what they're blocking as well. So suddenly you go from having just a few decision makers of what sort of content is available to having each node, right, each gateway operator being able to make their own decisions, but also able to share information with others. So that's one example of the types of challenges that you really face when you try to do something like build the decentralized web, build decentralized storage technologies.
And presumably, that would help. Who are some of the people that would help? Individual people with concerns about their own sort of use of the internet, but probably also organizations, social movements, dissidents in authoritarian regimes. These are some of the groups that would benefit from this, right?
From the technology?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is that there are a lot of important pieces of information that you really want to be able to preserve into the future. And one of the things that we do at FFDW is make sure that we're supporting those types of really important data being put onto the network. So some examples. One thing you've heard about today is Starling Lab. They worked with the USC Shoah Foundation to put thousands of genocide survivor testimony videos onto the FileCoin network. They also worked to record and preserve and also authenticate videos of war crimes evidence from Ukraine, and to be able to not only preserve that, but also to be able to show this actually was never tampered with using this technology. And they actually submitted that to that was part of a submission to the International Criminal Court with war crimes evidence of Ukraine. So those are a couple of examples. We also have historical footage from the Prelinger archives, which you heard about, all sorts of government data sets from NASA and NIH. We have tons of scientific data sets. For example, the Atlas project at CERN uses the FileCoin network. We also have the Berkeley Particle Accelerator Lab that stores, they have obviously just a massive amount of information. And so they're using the FileCoin network to preserve that data as well.
Right. That's fantastic. And I think that it highlights the importance of trust, right, and ways in which trust of data has to sort of travel with the data itself, right, but also the importance of witnessing and testimonials, both in the technical sense that some of our speakers have talked about today, but also in that long 20th century version of it, right, that that those Holocaust videos were preserved and recorded on film and on videotape and other technologies for a reason, right? And those reasons haven't gone away. And part of what you're doing is kind of meeting those challenges, but with new technologies for new forms of distrust and misinformation that are out there in the world. So that's really huge. Let me turn now for a minute to talk actually about particular set of partners, right? Because so drilling down from humanity to something a little smaller, right? Which is sort of universities, scholarly communities, libraries, archives. How are they different from FFDW, right? How are they different, and how are they partners, right? How are you working together, and what do you see each contributing?
Yeah, so we do a ton of work with universities, and it's really amazing. Obviously, at any university, there's all sorts of different things going on, and so the ways that FileCoin Foundation for the Decentralized Web or others in the FileCoin network collaborate with universities is actually a pretty broad range. So I mentioned, for example, that the University of California Particle Physics Lab stores their data on the FileCoin network. That's one way in which we collaborate with universities, which is that a lot of university data ends up on the FileCoin network to be preserved into the future. But we also have some more targeted projects, like, for example, working with the Harvard Library Innovation Lab on the problem of link rot. And, what do you do about the fact that over 50% of the links in Supreme Court decisions are now broken, right? Even though these are things that are footnoted in a Supreme Court decision. How do you fix that? And so one of the ways in which we work with universities is those types of targeted programs as well.
I think most people in the room here have some connection to a university. And those are places where I think many of us thrive, but also that bring their own frustrations. This is a question off the cuff for you. What are your impressions of how universities need to change? Or what universities, what are they doing right, and where do they need a little nudge from a group like yours?
Yeah. So, one of the things, Juan Bennett, who created the FileCoin network and IPFS, has a lot of really cool talks out there about the innovation chasm between sort of the research and development that happens in the world and like actually putting that into action. And he has a lot of really cool talks that I would definitely point anyone in this room to on what will it take to bridge that chasm, and what are the problems that come from, just the way that we've set up capital, the way that we've set up university systems versus things like the Silicon Valley as very separate places, and a lot of really interesting ideas from Juan that I would point to. I also think there are some really important pieces involving how intellectual property is treated. And I think when it comes to things like for us, our technology is fully open source, right? And everything we do is really dedicated to building open source technologies, and that's everywhere in our stack. And whenever we're funding projects, we're making sure that technology is also going to be open sourced. But I do think that one really important thing for universities to consider is this idea of the IP that's being created. Is that IP being put into the public domain, or is it being kept as proprietary? And that's, one of the things that can lead to the innovation chasm that Juan likes to talk about.
Yes, that's going to be another challenge to conquer going forward. But it's a great segue to another conversation that I wanted to put on the table, which is sort of questions of regulation, right? So often an emerging technology comes out and it's misaligned with the existing regulatory regime, right? And this is, in some ways, this is the story of your career, right? That you've confronted this in your own work. You've been active, not in sort of speaking and addressing questions of crypto policy, broadly speaking, and including testifying not only in the U.S. context but also globally, which is another important question. So on all those axes, right? Sort of where is regulation, both in the United States and globally, and what's your sense of the current regulatory landscape for decentralized tools and related technologies like that? Where are we now, and where might we be going?
Yeah, so we're at this really important inflection point for quite a lot of technologies that we have taken for granted up to this point. So one of the things that's happening right now is around the world, there is really a push towards regulating cryptocurrency in a way that is untenable and would actually make it impossible for cryptocurrency technologies to operate. So just right now, there are several bills that we're worried might get appended to an omnibus bill in U.S. Congress that would literally halt all cryptocurrency technologies. But what happens, I think with a lot of people who are not in crypto in particular, is there's this sense I've noticed of, well, that's money. That's different. That's not encryption. That's not privacy technologies. That's a different thing. And there should be this different set of standards for money when it comes to regulation than for other technologies. The problem is that what is happening right now with cryptocurrency is really sort of the line that is being held for other technologies. So, for example, one of the bills right now that is really getting a lot more steam in Congress is the Warren-Marshall bill. And that bill is intended to basically halt the ability of cryptocurrencies to operate in the United States, number one. But it also has a lot of really important, creates a lot of problems for any kind of privacy preserving technology, which might include things like encryption. And so you have, I think, this moment in time where a lot of people who maybe don't care about cryptocurrencies are saying, well, that's a different thing. But at the same time, the regulatory response that is happening in the crypto space has a lot of really important implications for technologies that are far beyond just cryptocurrency, and a lot of really important fights happening, not just like this year, but like this week. In fact, today there's a hearing in Congress about whether cryptocurrency. Well, there's a hearing about financing of certain organizations overseas. And a really important sort of sub part of that hearing today is, what is cryptocurrency's role in that? And during the hearing, you have senators saying things like, we're going to introduce something that is going to sanction all of DeFi and all of these decentralized technologies. So something that is much, much bigger and broader than I think people realize.
Just to follow up on that, do you think it's a sense that members of Congress and policymaking communities don't have a full technical understanding of what they're advocating, or do you think that there's maybe a sort of an overambition in the regulatory space?
Well, I think a few years ago, there was just sort of not a deep understanding of the space. An interesting thing now is actually when you go to Capitol Hill, there are quite a few members of Congress who are very, very up to speed on cryptocurrency technology and care about it quite a bit. Either on either side, and care about the topic. So it's interesting. It's not just a sense of, well, they don't know anything about it and they need to be educated. I think there's this sense of because it's something that is for some people potentially scary. It is. There is a kind of gut reaction to it that leads to the idea of, well, let's just get this out of the U.S., right? Let's just not have this be a thing that happens in the U.S. or elsewhere. And so I think that's a big piece of it is not understanding that this technology is actually about so much more than finance. And one of the big messages that I bring to Congress when I'm talking about FileCoin is that this technology is not just about finance, right? We could not have 10 exabytes of storage capacity contributed to a decentralized storage network without this incentive mechanism that is created by cryptocurrency. And the ability to program your money brings about so many important use cases that are so far beyond just financial use cases. And that is something that I think is really not well understood and something that, FileCoin is a good example of. And so we really try to put that in front of lawmakers as much as possible as the example of why these technologies can be used far beyond finance.
Mm-hmm. And do you see different approaches in Europe or Asia or some of the other, in other non-US venues?
Yes. So there are a lot of different approaches around the world. Europe just passed MiCA, which is a comprehensive regulation for cryptocurrency. It is not perfect, but it was very, very well intentioned, which is to really create clear rules of the road for cryptocurrency projects. And there are places around the world that are very, very friendly towards cryptocurrency. Singapore comes to mind. Hong Kong is becoming more cryptocurrency friendly recently. And places where it's illegal to even own cryptocurrency and you can go to prison for that, right? So a wide variety around the world. And, I think it really does have a huge impact on where people are able to innovate. A lot of projects in the space have just left the US because it's just untenable to not have clear rules and to be in a pretty difficult regulatory environment.
Great. So I want to touch on maybe one more topic, and then we can see if there's some new thoughts in the room. And this morning earlier, I think it was Danny who gave us the warning from science fiction of a secret society that exists to make sure that society is not controlled by a secret society. Right. And I'm going to get the citation for that later. Right. And so this was in reflections on sort of the challenges of widespread adoption, right? Mainstream adoption of decentralized tools and other emerging technologies like this. Sort of what do you see as the point, right? The turning point when what needs to be done to expand adoption. And how will you know? When do you think that we're going to turn that corner?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when it comes to adoption, a lot of people, speaking particularly about the FileCoin network and IPFS, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how widespread and how much usage it already has. That just isn't, I think, well publicized. Just as one example, the vast majority of NFTs, so I think over 100 million of them, if you're looking at where they're actually stored, almost all of them are actually stored on IPFS or the FileCoin network because it's so important for them that, if some startup stops paying its AWS bill and the NFT disappears forever, like you have a problem. And that's something that IPFS can fix. So speaking for FileCoin and IPFS in particular, I think that these technologies actually have a lot more adoption than people realize. And I am also very hopeful about a lot of different ways in which the technologies can be used, even beyond what you would normally think of. So as one example, we have a partnership with Lockheed Martin Space on actually using the interplanetary file system, IPFS, for its original purpose, which is very, very long distance communication in space, and right now actually working on a demo mission for that we've been working on for the last 2 years to show how IPFS actually speeds up communications across long distances in space. So I think all sorts of ways that this technology is used that people haven't even thought of, and it's already really gotten a lot more adoption than I think we get credit for.
All right, so properly interplanetary. That's going to be fantastic, right? Yep. And maybe you can get us Pluto back while you're working on it. Right? All right, so we have just a couple minutes, and this was maybe not part of our original plan, but it's late. It's in the afternoon, and I don't want people to get too tired in their chairs. And there's a lot of distributed knowledge in this room, and a lot of people who would really love to know. A little bit more about where you see things headed. So I think if we have maybe 5 minutes of questions for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll go from there. The floor is open. Clayton. And introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Clayton Ainsworth. I'm the director of MIT Video. Just thinking about the mission statement. As you were talking, it occurred to me that originally I was thinking, like, first of all, how do you decide what is the most important data for all of humanity? Maybe not saying that quite right. Is the goal to provide a system to preserve that, or is it to actually preserve it? And I'm not sure I'm making that the nuances there, but being able to create a file format that allows you to preserve, or a system to preserve it, or actually helping to decide what is preserved?
Yeah, so I would say it's a little bit of both. So the first piece that's very important is just creating the technology, right? And a big part of what we do at both FileCoin Foundation and FFDW is really supporting the creation of these technologies, research and development, education. And then at FFDW in particular, one of the things that we focus on at FFDW is really identifying really important data sets that and helping them to onboard onto the FileCoin network. So things like genocide survivor testimony, war crimes evidence in Ukraine. But certainly, we do not expect to be the arbiters of what counts as important information. And an important part of it is just providing the technological platform on which many, many, many data sets are independently uploaded, totally unrelated to FileCoin Foundation.
Hi, Nathan with Proof Mode and Guardian Project. Thanks for all the support you've given us. And I asked this to Danny a little bit at the beginning. I'll rephrase it though. So in the last year, my old house in the Boston area, we switched to solar, right? We invested some money, we got all the equipment, now we've got solar, and now I get a check every month for all the surplus power I'm feeding back into the grid. It's really cool, And I looked at my big, ugly old basement, like, what if I filled this with hard drives? And became a FileCoin provider. And I know there's other networks. My nephew was like putting these weird routers in all of the family garages to make money off of some wireless, decentralized wireless thing. It's got a name, I forget what it is. Helium. So, and he was like making a bunch of money. And so I think that the answer, I think, from Danny and others was that FileCoin has moved on to a more commercial, but I still believe in that vision. Am I crazy? Should I be filling New England basements with hard drives to make money like I do with solar? Or is this past and now it's really about like ISPs and more professional organizations?
Yeah, so, I think one of the things that's so great about the FileCoin network is that the when you're doing storage providing, you can do it at a variety of different scales, right? So there are some companies building on that are providing storage on the FileCoin network that are like extremely professional, millions and millions of dollars of revenue, really doing it in a professional way. But there are individuals, in fact, I feel like Danny might have been doing this for a while.
He was trying to psych me out.
But there are individuals with the mining rig, the storage providing rig set up. So I think one of the things that's so great about the FileCoin network is certainly you can do it at scale, and certainly you can do it at less scale as well. And the whole point is really that you don't have to be AWS you don't have to have AWS in order to provide storage. I see Danny wants to add something to that or defend himself.
No, I was just I was just going to say, so one of the things that's really interesting at the moment is it's a huge ecosystem. It interacts with a bunch of other sort of decentralized services. And one of the new projects that's just coming out is actually to solve the problem that we talked about with mirroring open courseware, which is FileCoin is a great solution for storing huge amounts of data semi-permanently, but how do you distribute that? And there are a couple of related projects, one of which is called Saturn, and I think another one is called Station. And those are actually about creating a decentralized content delivery network. And that means you don't have to store, you can cache a bunch of data, but you act as like a place to deliver it locally. So, and one of the reasons why the folks sort of started thinking about this was, again, can we create something that has that BitTorrent folding at home thing where people can run it at home? And so I think that there's a growing set of projects around that as people's bandwidth and things increases at home. So yes, I don't want to shoot it down completely, but yeah, that's what you should look into.
Yeah, it's just, this duality of should we look at IPFS cluster and create a community effort using IPFS nodes and tell people how to manually pin, or is there some other effort that can handle, as you said, the incentive and the funding and the support so that it's all integrated? So I think I'd like that too. Yeah, I believe in the dream, so see what happens.
And I believe we're running into time, so
I think ending
before
with
we lose our room deposit, we should wrap up.
Yes, so ending on that theme of believing the dream sounds good. Any last words from you, Marta?
No, it's so great to be here. Thank you all for all of your amazing collaboration with us. There's so many project partners in the room, and it's so awesome to be in a room with so many people who are building on the technologies, working with the FileCoin network, preserving important data, and looking forward to the rest of the conversation later today.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you all.